Good morning and thank you for joining us. So today we're going to be diving into the second session, or the fourth session, I should say, of the Parbery Change series. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, which are the Ngunnawal people, and their leaders, past, present, and emerging. I'd especially like to extend a warm welcome to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islanders that are joining us today. So diving into the session, so the team that we have here at Parbery, we have Kim, who's the partner looking after the change practice. There's two principals in our practice, which is Michelle and myself. So I won't dive into that because I think I've covered this off quite a bit in the previous sessions. But I am joined today by a special guest host, to Christina, who's also one of our wonderful changes that works in our practice. So, Christina, would you like to give a little introduction about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Christina Gordon. I've been working in defence since 2016 and specialising in change management since 2018. So defence is definitely my bailiwick. I've previously completed law and I'm currently doing psychology to help back up some of that breadth of knowledge and skills that I've got.
Wonderful. Thank you. And thanks for joining us today.
No worries.
So today we're going to be diving into what we do when we deliver the change component of it. So we've been running this series. It is a 6-part series going through essentially the change process as we see it within Parbery and reinforcing our methodology. So we've already had some great sessions around assessing the change and what you want to do pre-gate zero or during your business case component, that scoping and planning of the change. So we're really getting to essentially today where the rubber meets the road. So, and that is delivering the change. And as we can see on our chart, this is always an incredibly busy time as a change manager, and we often wish we could plan ourselves, I think, at this point in time, more often than not. So just to reach back a little bit and reinforce some of the concepts that we've looked at. So when we talk about that scoping the change, planning the change, really what we're looking at is where is the business today, and assessing that component, where they need to be tomorrow, and quantifying what that gap is. And as change managers, that's essentially what we do, right? We manage the gap. So there's a whole range of drivers that can cause us to need to do a change initiative, including the evolution of technology. I'm personally working on a client at the moment which has a huge technology driver. It's a transformational piece around the way training is scoped and delivered. So that's really common, particularly today. We can have things like bombs. We can have things like responses to crisis because we just have to do it. We've had a change of government. We've had a change of department. We've had a change of policy. So there's lots of different drivers that can impact us. Out of that, though, we're going to run into, or we're going to probably pull some pretty consistent levers. So we're going to use communication. We're going to leverage our leaders. We're going to use training. We're going to use sponsor roadmaps, I should say. We're going to be looking at things like where are the stakeholders on that journey? Do we need to do resistance management? What are the tools? So the drivers could be many and varied. The toolkit tends to be pretty standard. How we apply the toolkit to drive that success is really where the magic happens and where the complexities can occur. Any thoughts on that, Christina?
Well, that's definitely where a lot of that, delivering the change, that's where that high effort comes into it, because while you might be, implementing proper sponsorship roadmaps and getting the leadership on board there, you're also concurrently doing those communications and training is a little bit down the track. So you can understand why there's so much work that goes into that. It is kind of like driving a machine at the end of the day, and it's a very slow machine that doesn't really want to get off the track a lot of the time. So, it makes you a master of, like a jack of all trades, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, spinning plates sometimes. Isn't it? Like, we got the comms bit going, but we don't have the training attendance we need, or this leader's gone a little bit pear-shaped. Wait, get them back on.
Yeah. And everyone needs something different at the end of the day. And that's where, we'll talk about that a little bit later on, where my favourite sticky parts come in when it comes to stakeholder engagement and that sort of analysis that sits behind that.
Awesome. Excellent. So last session, we actually introduced this concept of a high-level change plan. So this is a genericized version of a change plan, and obviously depending on the scale, complexity, scope of the initiative, the timescale across this can vary. But what we're looking at today is really that delivery component. And as I said, we're looking at our change toolkit, as I would consider it. So we're going to be looking at change management activities, leadership engagement activities. One of the things that I feel like I spent all of yesterday on client side, and I've been grappling with this particular client issue for about 6 weeks now. And I've been going round and round and round on it, working with multiple stakeholders, trying to get a decision. And what occurred to me after many, many long conversations and meetings that really went nowhere was, who has the decision rights? Who is the individual that actually signs off and is the authority on this? And what became apparent as part of that conversation is we don't know that bit, which is why we've had multiple quite senior people in the organisation going round and round on this with their opinions, but we didn't actually have the opinion in the room that we needed. I was like, right, so let's go find the leader that has the decision rights, the authority to sign off on it. And thankfully, we're not actually at the delivery of this capability yet. Otherwise, we'd be in a very difficult situation where we've potentially built a huge amount of collateral. We've probably spent tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars of time, effort, and materials, only to find out we might not need to do any of it. So just a little bit of a leadership story and why they're important, but we're going to be focusing on that leadership engagement component. Christina's very passionate about stakeholder engagement.
And a lot of that problem that you've just highlighted is something that's really common across many organisations. I mean, even in defence itself, you've got quite a hierarchical organisation, and even though people might be sitting in certain places, the decision rights not necessarily sitting with them. And it's all about who you know, not what you know, when it comes to this. And that's, I think, one of the biggest talents that changes bring to these sorts of projects.
Well, that was the interesting thing, that you think as a change manager, you wouldn't need to be asked that question, who has decision rights. That's a governance question normally.
Yeah.
But these are all governance people, but they hadn't really joined the dots. So I think that's the unique benefit we can add as change managers as well. It's like, there's a process, but who are the people involved in it?
Yeah.
I think having that people focus is
I think one of the best descriptions people gave me for this part of change management is we end up being the glue that sits there and brings everything together. Because not only is the rubber hitting the road change management here, but often in a project, this is where the big things are happening, and we're all starting to see that roll out. And everyone's got their priorities, everyone's got their needs, desires, and that's what we're here to glue it all together for.
Yep, absolutely. And once we've got all the good people and the leaders and everything sorted out, obviously we're going to have our comms activity that's going to be pushed out. Ideally, the organisation talking to the eyes of the organisation. So Army to Army, Air Force to Air Force, APS to APS. We're going to be aligning the organisation, and trying to keep things on track. And then realistically, a very, very key, but really the last lever in the chain is just training people on how to do their job in the new ways of working. So it really falls back to the who, how, and why, and I did that backwards on purpose. If you're wondering, I am actually dyslexic, but realistically, we've already talked about the why and why it's important, and really driving commonality and vision through that, and that's that leadership component. We've done our assessment component through the preparation work and planning, so we've come down with the how. Now we're really working with the who that we need to actually bring on board with this. This is it. It's all about the people at this point in time.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, this is my favourite bit of it all, and this is probably the hardest part, because you are what to one person is not necessarily going to work for others, and you've got to have all of your other ducks lined up in a row in order to come to this with what you need to actually make it work at the end of the day. So and the rubber hits the road. So based on that, now you can see on the slide there, we've got, 4 proposed roles, and oftentimes when you are delivering change, it's a bit bigger than that. So for the purposes of discussion, we're going to look at each one of these roles as a group of people. Now, following having had, your workshops, your interviews, everything else like that, we've assessed what the change is going to be. You have areas of high impact, which are indicated by the 95%. So people, it's going to impact, their jobs, it's going to impact their behaviours, it's going to impact technology, and then you've got areas of low impact as well. You can see there that one of the stakeholder groups actually has a very little change going on for them. So the amount of effort for what you put in for each lever, and this is what tells us where we want to put our extra effort into it, where we want to have that extra time, where the extra activities go, and monitoring that as we continue to do that to see that efficacy of how we're doing. I think it's probably one of the key things that supports this, but that's for another day. But yes, and through that work, that's how you get them ready for the change, accepting the change, and getting them, as it says, winning hearts and minds. And that's the biggest thing, is getting the person ready for it.
I think the other really important component of assessing the change and being able to have some data, because we talk about data-driven change management as part of the Parbery methodology, is at some point in time, no matter what organisation you're in, there's a senior leader somewhere that needs to go change approved.
Yeah.
Right. So by being able to actually collect the data, quantify it, and say, you know what, this is where these guys are up to, and they're comfortable to take on this change, or they're not, boss, maybe we should actually hold up on this because we actually need to do some remediation work, and we don't want to see the sentence.
We don't want to be on the front page of the Australian.
Whatever that might be, it's an important thing. I mean, being able to feed this up and give the leaders confidence is an important part of this as well.
Absolutely.
So I think you have control.
There we go.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So this is an example of the way that we actually do the delivery of change, and everyone's got something different, but this is just Parbery's approach. And this is, as you can see here, we've got different phases of stakeholder reception, their alignment, and where they're sitting in current state and future state. So as an example, stakeholder 1 may be currently unaware of the change, and we want them to be understanding. This could be someone who is going to be an end user of a program potentially down the road, but doesn't necessarily need to be using it in their day-to-day activity. Now, of course, you can see that there is that change reception of positive and negative. So, of course, ideally, we'd love everyone to be positive about it, but there will always be some skeptics, and there are times that we won't be able to win that positivity as long as they are, they've reached their target state of where we need them to be on that change spectrum. We're actually doing pretty well, and over time, a lot of the time, those skeptics will start to see the benefits of those changes and will probably change their positive or negative reaction. But through that, we'll have a schedule of different activities to move our stakeholders through those different phases of change receptiveness. So, bringing awareness can be as simple as, pulling that communications lever and having town halls or videos on the home intranet page, and then moving right to, the more complicated things, such as actually attending training sessions, having a how-to and tips and tricks to move from that understanding to adopted. Now, institutionalised, that's the dream, and quite often for changes, we don't get to see that, but that's where you ultimately want it to be, because then it's implemented, you're never having to worry about it again, it's just BAU, and we can all, as it says, celebrate with a cup of tea, which is, ideally where we want to be at the end of a change, and that's what we all strive for, but it takes time, and, it can take months, years, it can take, I've never seen it done in weeks, but it can take a very long time for that. So monitoring that and helping people along, and that's where that previous analysis and that planning of, where efforts should be helps to feed into this kind of a plan, which, helps us develop what we go onto next.
So just before we do move on, I was going to say the other thing. That's all right, and I completely agree with what you said. But what I like about this slide is that it's also a practical approach, right? So, as you said, Christina, in a perfect world, everybody would be institutionalised. They've drunk the Kool-Aid, and everyone's sitting around and singing Kumbaya. Brilliant. The reality of it is there's commercial constraints on what we can do and what we have time to do. And also, the way how receptive people are going to be to the change. My sister-in-law is always a fan of saying to me, she's a solicitor, she says, you get what you get and don't get upset, right? Not that we want to be saying that to our key stakeholders, but some of them, will still be resistant. That's where we go into resistance management and all that good stuff. But, where do they practically need to be on the scale in the time frame that we can deliver? So what does good look like? This is not going to be, unfortunately, everybody fully institutionalised.
Yeah.
But having a practical approach, having a plan, having a target, and delivering on that, is critical.
Yeah. Not everyone's going to like chocolate milk. Some people like strawberry milk, and that's okay.
Yeah, that's me. I like strawberry milk. Hence the pink shirt, maybe. No.
Yeah. I'm a nice coffee person myself.
Yeah.
So then through that, this is actually one of the more exciting techie parts that I know Kim is very enthusiastic about. So Parbery's developed a program called Mandala, and through that we're able to actually feed all of our change information into that to help develop something that's a little bit more user-friendly rather than the traditional documents and PDFs that have a list of things for us to do, and that's where we bring in the start, stop, continue with activities. So in line with all those levers that we're pulling and changing and doing everything with, we'll have start, stop, continue for all of our stakeholder groups, and then as required, it may shift down to sub-stakeholder groups, for lack of a better term. I think it's quite neat to sit there and see it in action. You'll be able to sit there and see what the activities are when you're starting the activities. So you're going to start to stop people from using the old program by a particular date. So you've got to make sure that everything else is in line with that to go along with it. Dan, did you have any?
Well, yeah, I think with the start, stops, continue concept, I think the continue bit is a really important thing to be able to clearly define as well.
And quite often underestimated, I think.
Yeah, because like you go and normally, or what we quite often do as changes, we get really obsessed with managing the gap. So what is actually changing? That's our jobs. But there's a degree of comfort that people can get when if you can turn around. Let's use 80-20 rule, right? That's good as any. You go into someone and say, you know what? Actually, 80% of your job is going to stay exactly the same as it is. All we're really changing is 20%. So, you're stopping 20%, you're starting a new 20%, you're continuing the 80%. A lot of people, that'll bring down their anxiety or a lot of the fear of the change if they can really understand what it is that they get to continue doing. There's freeze, unfreeze, freeze is a similar kind of theory, and that they are very powerful concepts, which can help people come on that journey with you. Because most of the time when I see resistance to change, the reality is it's around people feeling that they're going to be detracted or they're going to not be able to do the job as well as they want to. Right, so it's that fear of failure.
It's myths that we end up. It's quite a common thing psychologically for people, not just in organisations in the workplace, but I mean, you could have an unfounded fear that you're going to run out of your favourite cereal at the grocery store based on absolutely nothing. But knowing that you can continually buy that there is something that helps, keep
alleviate that fear, right? So if it's 80% the same, what's to be afraid of? It's only 20%, easy.
Yeah, absolutely.
I tell you what, with following through this, I mean, as a part of change, which is where all the rubber meets the road, I think what we've done is we've talked through essentially the key steps. Obviously, by the time you've come in, you've properly assessed that change, you've developed a bespoke plan to properly enable the change that you're delivering. Each one of those buckets is going to be very complex.
Yeah.
You know, but the reality is when we're talking generality, as we are in these presentations, these are the principles we're applying. And as I say, it's easy to say, hard to do.
Very different what
Yeah.
you say to do. Like
Yeah.
this is why it is that high effort, because there is so much going on in this phase, and this is where those big discussions happen. This is when you've got change managers in all of those project meetings and engaging with stakeholders. And for most of us, this is the really exciting part, because you get to go out and actually do stuff with all that information that you've gathered, all of that knowledge and experience that you've got. But it's the really hard part. This is the part where you're doing big days, you're tired at the end of it because there's just so much, and you're taking those stakeholders on that journey to get them to where they need to be.
It can be a little bit brutal too, in that you know, at this point in time, if you're doing an ICT-led change, which is quite common, it's a lot of what we do at Parbery, you are also trusting that your friends in the IT have actually designed, built, and tested the thing that meets the requirements. Otherwise, there's a lot of tap dancing that can be done at this phase as well. Which is actually part of, I think, the criticality of aligning your leaders, you know, and doing your business readiness and getting those ticks in the boxes to make sure that we've done enough to protect ourselves, the project, and the business universally. That what is being delivered is actually the right solution. Otherwise, you know, as I say, you can put lipstick on a pig, and you know it's still a pig. Or a lipstick and a tutu, I believe. They don't mind the lipstick, I'm told. It's a tutu they dislike. But no, we want to make sure that we have a good, genuine solution that's going to actually deliver the benefits. Otherwise, quite often as a change manager, we're the ones out the front, you know, taking the bullets, you know, because it's not actually doing all the things that we've communicated, we've told, we've engaged. And we've solved the dream.
That's it. We are the face of the project at the end of the day, and that's where that glue comes into it. And in a cultural organisational change where you're starting to actually impact people on a very personal level, this is where a lot of the emotions come out. And that's something that, again, as change managers, as the glue we've been prepping for and ready and everything else like that. This is where it's all happening. So yes, I don't think this whole discussion, I don't think it really summarizes just how big this part is. Sit here and wax lyrical about how it actually applies in practice, then you probably be hearing me complain a bit.
Theory's simple.
Yes. Absolutely.
It's excellent. Well, do we have any questions from that have come in through the chat? Sorry, I've sort of been looking at the deck. I haven't seen anything come in. No. Excellent. Well, for those that have joined us, thank you very much for joining us today. We actually only have 2 more presentations left in this series. So next week, we're going to be looking at evaluate and review. So this is really, I guess, where we're asking the question, did our ICT friends actually design, build and deliver the thing that the business asked them to do? And how do we manage and sustain that change?
We do have one question from Kelly.
Oh, excellent. Yeah.
Do you use the same approach of stop, start, continue for non-tech changes? So in my experience, I have. You can use that stop, start technique for pretty much any change. I think it's one of the most effective sort of structures to activities. And again, you've done a bit more than I have.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, regardless of what sort of change you're delivering, whether it be an ICT, a HR, an organisational, a structural, there's going to be things that change in reporting lines, in processes, in, if it's HR, potentially onboarding, offboarding personnel. If it's an organisational change, it will be reporting lines. Regardless of what it is, if you change my reporting line, at some point in time, I'm going to have to stop talking to my old boss from a managerial position and start talking to a new boss. And obviously, I probably want to maintain a personal relationship, maybe, depending on the boss. But there is going to be that shift of, this person's now my career manager. So the start continue is consistent. I think that's a nice example from a HR change too. You might change my boss, so my reporting line changes, but actually the job I'm doing stays the same.
Yeah, and we had something similar. Again, not to bore everyone, but in defence, when ASD separated that statutory agency, it was a policy change that sat behind that. But that stop, start, continue started, at that ministerial level of we're going to have a new band 3 in ASD, which means that person starts there, and eventually the responsibilities shift. And then it went down to little things like continuing to communicate between certain sections across defence to make sure that what we were doing, like at the end of the day, operations didn't actually change for us at the, you know, at the coal face, but for everyone else, it was a really big shift up the top. So
Yeah, I mean, another example was when we were working on GovERP.
yeah,
You know, and it moved from finance to Services Australia. Now, as a project, we had to continue working, and it actually didn't change the solution, what we're doing, what we're working on, but the delivery agency changed.
Yeah.
So,
and that didn't change. And Kelly's got a great point. It's that was where it came down to what it will and won't affect. It didn't affect how we were working. It didn't. I mean, we changed buildings eventually, but at the end of the day, we were still the same people. We still had the same mandate. We still had the same roles. It was just a different department.
Still the same agencies we were working with. Yeah, same technology. Yeah, but you know, fundamentally, it was actually quite a material change from that organisational perspective, right? That reporting structure, how they wanted to run the project, the methodologies they were using to run the project. So, yeah.
Absolutely. But yeah, thank you for that question, Kelly.
Yeah, great question.
But yes, from my end, that's pretty much all I've got to say in this very short time frame.
Well, I think it was nice half an hour.
Yeah.
Short and sharp. That's how we like to do things. So enjoy the rest of your week, and hopefully we'll see you all again next week.
You have a good day.